Is the way you're living your life useful or not useful? Success is a choice, and so is the struggle. I'm going to take you all the way back to 1973. I got picked up at school by my father. I was told to go home and pack a bag, and before I knew it, I was in Australia. I was there for 3 months, wrote letters to my mom. My parents were separated, but she never got them. I learned that my father wanted to emigrate to Australia. It was his dream, but he couldn't find a suitable employment, and we ended up coming back to Canada. For the 3 months, my mother didn't know where we were as children, my sister and I, and that would be formally called kidnapping. My parents fought for us in court. My father had more money than my mother, and he retained custody of us. I went on to live with my father from the ages of 8.5 to 17 when I left. Got a job working at McDonald's and several other jobs. And by the time I was 21, I decided to go to Australia. We had all experienced Australia, and I thought that's a great place to go. My sister had moved there, and she told me to come and live with her. I went there, and I asked myself, what can I do now? And I got a job driving a taxi. For 7 months, I drove a taxi. And while I drove that taxi, I asked myself, what can I do now? And I maximized the 12 hours that I drove that car. My goal was to have the meter running. I peed while the meter was running. I ate while the meter was running, and that meter ran for as close to 12 hours as possible. I kept a log in my car of how much money I made. And sometimes I even picked up more than one fare. I asked the person in the car when somebody was trying to hail down, I said, hey, if they're going in the same direction, why don't I pick them up and we can do a discount? I'd maybe make 150% instead of 100% on that fare. Sometimes at the end of the night, there would be an opportunity for the closing of a club and the public transportation was finished. And I would put 3 people in a car and I'd head to the North Shore and I'd drop 3 different people off and maximize my fare. I saved up my money because I wanted to be a pilot. When you have a reason, a compelling reason to do something, then you will have a tendency to step up. I saved up a ton of money, and then I decided that I didn't want to be a pilot. I had a different focus, so I went to Southeast Asia, and I traveled through there for 7 months. Ran out of all my money, finally came home broke, and decided to go live with my mom and go study philosophy at the University of Concordia. While I was paying for my studies by getting a job at a restaurant, I was hired by a guy that happened to be the son of my mom's new husband. Super charming guy, Portuguese. He hired me, and I asked myself, what can I do? I showed up early and I stayed late, and before I knew it, I was offered to be partners at this restaurant called the Bistro Express. Yes, it was like a little cafe with cappuccinos. It was ahead of its time, but I loved working there. I loved serving. I loved being in a mode of helping people and making them happy. So I borrowed $20,000 from my mom, her entire savings, and I invested it in that restaurant, and I became a 10% owner. What I didn't know was that restaurants have a honeymoon cycle. In the first 9 months, approximately, everybody wants to try that restaurant at least how many times? 1 time. We all thought we were onto something, but we were onto something for a small portion of the population. Before I knew it, people stopped coming in. We couldn't afford to pay the rent, or I should say the payroll. So I worked for 6 months for free. My partners went back to work in the airline. And by the time we closed doors and sold the assets and made nothing, just got out of the lease, I had nothing. I had a motorcycle. I'd worked for 6 months for free. I bled everything I had. And I asked myself, what can I do now? So my partner had gone back to the airlines. He was in charge of the in-flight department. He got me a job as a flight attendant, but I had to move to Quebec City, and I had to study and become a flight attendant in French. Now, I did not speak French. I spoke a few words, but I was motivated. My back was against the wall, and I felt terrible for my mom. My mom never had a lot of money, and she went through this kidnapping. When we were kidnapped, she hired a lawyer. She worked 3 jobs. She hired a detective trying to find us. It must have been hell for her. And the last thing I wanted her to do was to go through hell again. So my goal was to get this money back. I asked myself, what could I do? I got this job as a flight attendant. Remember, 1 page was in French, 1 page was in English, and I did my best. There was 13 of us. I was the only English speaking guy. And I rented a room. I had a red Toyota that I bought for $200, rusted out bottom. Rented a room in a wealthy lady's house in her basement. And I drove to work. And I asked myself, what could I do? And I told the dispatcher that if anybody was sick, call me. I'll say yes every time. Yes, say yes every time. And I will take a spot. I will fill it in. I will make your life easy, because I just kept on thinking, how can I serve? How can I add value? I got a lot of extra shifts and I always said yes. And before you know it, I got promoted to purser, and then I got promoted to director, and I got in charge. I was by now about 24 years old, and I'm hiring and training flight attendants. Yes, I'm doing the security. I'm interviewing people. I'm running ads. I'm still flying as a flight attendant and filling in the gaps when people are sick, because I had a commitment to make it happen no matter what. Because success is a choice, and so is struggle. And if you ask yourself, what can you do now? There's probably something you can do. And at that time, I got a job parking cars at the Hotel des Gouverneurs at night or on weekends, as a porter. They were doing construction and they had to drive the cars to another parking lot. And so there was extra jobs. I made some money doing that. And I was reading a book called Nothing Down by Robert G. Allen. And I started looking for creative ways to buy some real estate. And I came across a property that was for sale, and I negotiated a purchase price of $62,500 on Bourget Street in Lac Beauport. I remember it. $2,000 down on my credit card, and the rest, they gave me owner financing. And I took over this small 3-bedroom property with 3 bedrooms upstairs and a bunch of rooms in the basement. And there were 4 people that were in need of care. One needed insulin shots. One was a little bit, mentally challenged. And sometimes would wake up in the middle of the night and wander down the street, and I'd have to go look for him. But I took on this property, hired somebody to help me, and I ran that property, was a flight attendant, or now was running the in-flight department, parking cars at night, because I kept on asking myself, what can I do now? What can I do now? And I did this for 18 months. And I paid my mother back the $20,000. I moved from Quebec City back to Montreal and opened up a senior citizen home. I'm maybe 26, 27 years old by now. Bought a 6-bedroom home and renovated it, because I grew up on a farm. I knew how to renovate things, and turned it into a 9-bedroom home and called it Evergreen Place, and had senior citizens come in there. My mother became my partner. My wife at the time became my partner, and the 3 of us ran that thing, living in the basement. And I kept on asking myself, what can I do now? What can I do now? And I worked my butt off. I was still working in the airlines at that time, running a senior citizen home. And then my father got sick, and many of you may know this story at that time. My father got sick, and I flew to Australia several times to take care of him. He had debts from back taxes not paid in Canada, and I lost my job as a flight attendant. I sued the company for wrongful dismissal, lost a lot of money, getting an interesting lesson that David versus Goliath doesn't work out so well. And my relationship fell apart. I lost the home, and I had by then acquired 2 other rental properties, and I lost everything. And then that's when I went into real estate, and I was terrible in real estate. I sold 1 home the first year. I was a secret agent. I was afraid to sell. I had never really sold in my life. And then a mentor came along, and he guided me to become one of the most successful real estate agents in the province of Quebec. And I ran the most successful real estate office in the province. I took it from 94 agents when I bought it to 275. From 300 million in sales to over $1 billion, and I sold it for $4 million a few years later. Success is a choice, and so is struggling. What can you do today during this pandemic that is going to have you break through and own your success? Your work ethic and your curiosity are going to be weapons of mass destruction when it comes to a life of mediocrity. What I did was I just kept on asking myself, what can I do now? How can I serve? Say yes to overtime. Say yes to showing up early. Say yes to staying late. Say yes to adding value. Say yes to raising your standards. Say yes to figuring something out that you never did. Did I know how to give insulin shots? Hell no. But I knew I could figure it out. Did I always know how to cook a meal for people in a senior citizen home? No, but I knew I could figure it out. Did I know who was going to do their nails and who was going to talk to them and take care of them? No, but my mother worked in social services, so I drafted her. Did I know how to qualify for mortgages and to sell and buy real estate and make all that happen? No. What's great about success is it forces you to become the best and biggest version of yourself. And I guess for most of my life, and you may look at this as perhaps a warning or an example. I'm not saying that my life is the way you need to do it. I'm just saying, look at it. And I say this to people I coach. Is the way you're living your life useful or not useful? Is it empowering or disempowering? Is it working or not working? And if it's in the negative side of that column, then maybe there's some choices and changes you can make, because success is a choice. And what can you do today to step up, to become a better version of yourself, to serve the people around you, to add so much value that you cannot be ignored? I'll say that again, to add so much value that you cannot be ignored. I have two major businesses today, a real estate office with an unbelievably powerful team that continue to add so much value that I cannot ignore them. We have such momentum and we're thriving through this pandemic because everybody on that team continues to show up and add massive value. I run a mastermind group, an online entrepreneurial coaching platform, and I have such an amazing team that continues to add so much value that we're thriving during this pandemic. Many of you that are in that tribe are doing the same thing, not only in your worlds, but in the tribe. Many of you are adding so much value in the tribe, giving to people in the tribe, asking how you can help each other in the tribe. Because is it not true that it feels so good to help another human being? We were built to serve. And if you don't find that place to serve, it's an empty life. It's a meaningless life. So find your place to serve and ask yourself, what can I do now? Pick up a plate, bring a glass of water, serve somebody, literally serve somebody. Offer to help. And when you are in that mode, doors open. I could tell you 100 stories of things that became opportunities because I served and I just gave. When I started my mastermind groups, I worked for 6 months for free. And then I was voted CEO of the company, of the organization, GoBundance. But I loved what I was doing. Wherever you are, my suggestion to you is you were built to serve. Serve. And if you're not sure what to do, you could drive a taxi, you could work at McDonald's, you could sweep the floor, you could pour a cup of coffee, you could do whatever. But struggle's a choice. So I'm going to say this, and you may not be doing this. So if I'm not speaking to you, don't take this personally. Get up off of your ass and take action today. Stop the pity party. Stop telling yourself you can't, you don't know what, you're waiting. You are built to serve. Find a way to serve. Serve whatever is around you, whatever you can do. I loved working in that restaurant. I remember my mentor in that restaurant, Des Ryan, he would say, you know, Rock, if you find it within you, every time you serve somebody, say at the end of that, it's my pleasure, or with pleasure. Somebody would say, thank you. And you say, with pleasure, with pleasure, with pleasure. It's my pleasure to serve. And then surround yourself with people and a group of people like I'm so blessed to be part of in my mastermind groups that have the similar values. And then you're not running your marathon race alone. You're running it as a tribe with a vibe of success that are built to serve. You were built to serve. Don't hold back. There's nothing too small. Open a door, say thank you, say please, pay somebody a compliment, raise and claim your own energy. Tell the people around you, yes, I'll take the extra shift. When you're stuck or in dire straits, call me. I'll say yes. And guess what? The opportunities will start to come to you. Some people are waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. Now is the perfect moment for you to serve, for you to say yes, for you to claim your success. These are going to be looked back on as some of the greatest of times. I can tell you this, I cannot wait for the stock market to open up because I've made some choices that are being echoed the last few days that are wonderful. And then even if they're not, they still are. Success is a choice and you were built to serve. Say yes and figure it out later.